Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching. The end of the year was difficult. The coming one didn't promise to be easy either. The girl was typing, frowning slightly as the sound of fireworks rumbled outside the window. It's the 5th of January, and they're still setting off fireworks. Hadn't all the supplies been emptied yet, she thought, and then began to stubbornly bang on the keyboard again. The reason for another work stoppage was a signal about a new message in her messenger, and she smiled broadly. After reading the name of the contact, it came from a man she had known for about 2 months, but adored him so much that she wrote it down everywhere as her favorite. My dear Alice, how terribly I miss you. I wish I could hold you. My beloved Alice. The gentle word made the girl dream of how good it would be to actually be in the arms of her beloved Jackson right now. Of course, Alice herself had turned down a date with her lover today because she had to hurry to make the course order of another student. But how she wanted to change her decision. Only a dire need for money got in the way. The girl grabbed at every opportunity to make money. She worked as a manager in a trading company. In her spare time, she filled service orders and wrote various college papers. But she still needed money, as she had for the past 5 years. It was then that the crucial struggle for her mother's life began. Alice then barely made it to the 3rd year of the institute. One quiet evening at home divided the life of a small family of mother and daughter into 2 completely different parts. Zoya, who was unusually thoughtful and to Alice's questions answered tediously, informed her daughter that they needed to have a serious talk. The girl seemed like she was about to hear some scary phrases. Anyway, daughter, I've always been frank with you, and I'm not going to lie to you now. They found me with cancer, and I want you to know. Whatever the outcome, you need to finish your studies. Alice, I love you very much, and I will not let my health problems affect your future. Although it was a pity to lose the corner of land where Zoya and her daughter had even arranged a small greenhouse, we had to sell the dacha. Thanks to the fact that it was not located at the back of civilization, but in a picturesque place, not far from the city, even though the set price was not too low, the interested buyers were found very quickly. They didn't even haggle too much, except that the proceeds were quickly spent anyway. Surgery and subsequent radiation therapy deprived my mother's job, disability payments, and more than a modest stipend, Alice, barely enough for drugs and utilities. And the girl did the work for all students who were willing to pay money or anything that could be useful to the family. Even the laptop on which Alice worked so far she got from one tomboy, which is not known why she needed a degree in philology. Veronica clearly stood out in terms of material wealth, and it seems that the university education was a bliss of her parents. Be that as it may, but it was she once handed Alice's laptop. And she explained, "Consider that I gave it to you help me with my studies. Alice, you sit in all this nonsense and not only write a normal grade, but you can also explain me briefly so that I was at least a little bit in the subject." So Alice got her first regular client. She also brought her other friends. Not too diligent classmate students throughout the flow knew that the quality would be on top. In addition, they always knew that they would be chewed up as a bonus, if necessary, what they supposedly printed themselves. To Alice's delight, her services were in demand. And although this income was, you might say, seasonal, the situation with finances has improved thanks to the patronage of the same Veronica. Alice got a job with some business partners and her parents. So there was some confidence and stability. Even with all the financial income, of course, it was not possible to luxuriate, but the specter of poverty from her mother's girlfriend receded, writing several diplomas, and along the way managed to defend their own. Alice graduated from university to the delight of her mother. A graduate of the Faculty of Philology, had no illusions but still tried to get a job in their specialty. However, she was offered such a miserable salary that she refused, thanking her for the time allotted to her. She stayed at her previous place. Last year she seemed to get a raise, but happiness again was short-lived. Recently, the enemy, which Alice and her mother thought defeated, has reared its head again, although nothing foretold trouble. Zoya had a recurrence of the disease. Money was needed again, but there was nothing left to sell. There wasn't much saved. Zoya underwent an examination, and almost just before the holiday she was admitted to the hospital, told to prepare for an operation to remove the tumor. And the girl understood the seriousness of her mother's situation, although everything seemed to be free. But they were warned that for a good anesthesia and sensitivity should be thanked. The recovery period, as Alice well remembered, also required money, so she worked as hard as she could. The girl was not ashamed to take on the cleaning of apartments, because then paid unskilled physical labor, even more than the execution of student jobs. In addition, it was a part-time job as a janitor that led her to her fateful acquaintance. And the girl did not regret at all that she had a college degree. She mopped floors and cleaned apartments. The memories flashed through her mind. She felt especially sad and lonely. The text began to merge into a continuous string of letters. And sometimes in the middle of a sentence, the girl suddenly realized that she could not remember what sense originally wanted to put the phrase, "It was necessary to take a break, otherwise the mistakes would be inevitable." Alice was already on the phone with her mother, trying to cheer her up and put her in a positive mood. Besides, it was quite late to bother her again and hear her native voice. It had long been obvious to the girl that she was on the verge of emotional exhaustion and was holding on only by miracle, most likely one of the components of that support that kept her going. There had been encounters with the gallant and affectionate Jackson. Alice longed for the warmth, the embrace of the man she loved. She allowed herself to reread the message he had sent. The girl was not prone to adventures, but she suddenly felt that she just couldn't stand it if she didn't see the man she loved. Alice figured that even if she let herself rest until morning and go to work tomorrow, she would be able to type the next evening and night. Deadline agreed with the next student customer. The more so that after a nice date, she probably will improve her mood. And on the spirits to write a term paper will be much easier. Having made a decision, Alice began to hurriedly dress. She thought it would be nice to surprise Jackson, and she didn't bother to tell him she was coming. A cab was a luxury for a girl, but she wanted to hug her beloved so badly that she did not skimp and soon got out of the car near the familiar house. She saw that Jackson's car was parked in its usual spot, and only now the thought occurred to her that the man might not be home. But luck was on her side, and she didn't even have to ring the intercom, because a middle-aged lady came out of the entrance leading a small dog for a walk. Alice did not wait for the elevator and went to the 4th floor, breathing a little. She pressed the doorbell. A trill sounded, seemed like heavenly music to the girl. But instead of her lover, she saw a pretty woman in a Jackson apron. The stranger's hands were a little stained with flour, but it was impossible to mistake her for a cook. The beautiful blue eyes were studying her. Alice felt quite uncomfortable. The girl suddenly realized how unfortunate her idea was, to show up at her lover's without warning. After a short pause, the stranger politely inquired, "Good evening. Who are you here to see?" Alice woke up from her daze and answered, "Hello. If you could call Jackson, please." The stranger was still polite but showed interest again. "He's not here right now." "Excuse me, who are you? And what is your business?" From surprise, Alice was confused. And instead of apologizing and leaving, for some reason she started talking and asked the stranger not too correct questions. "I'm Alice, a friend of Jackson's. Can you tell me, is he coming back soon? And what are you doing in his apartment? You must be his sister. He told me you used to visit him sometime." The woman smiled and looked away with a gesture, inviting me in. "That's right, I'm his sister. Come in, Alice. My brother didn't tell me much about you, so let's get to know each other, so to speak, up close. My brother will be here soon. He wasn't expecting anyone. I arrived unannounced and found he had hardly any groceries. Like a hospitable host, Jackson rushed to get the groceries. You just missed him a little bit, but he said there's a store just around the corner. In the meantime, we'll have time to talk to you for a while. By the way, if you don't mind, I'd like to start speaking on a first-name basis. Alice came to her senses a little after the surprise and tried to retreat. In her gut, assuming that Jackson's sister would interrogate her. I basically just wanted to surprise him. I don't have a lot of free time. I'm sorry, we'll talk more some other time. But it was impossible to argue with a woman whose softness and politeness were evident in her strong-willed nature. What is it, Alice? My brother would never forgive me if I let you go now. It's late. Get undressed, and let's have a girl's secret. I'll have a cake ready in a hurry. From what I've managed to find, ashamed of her sudden intrusion, Alice awkwardly took off the down jacket, which she carefully hung in the closet in the compartment, and then hesitated, stretching the zipper on the boots, which had long needed repair. From the awkwardness of the situation she found herself in, the girl became quite agitated. She felt as if her beloved Jackson's sister was looking at her in a judgmental manner. But when the girl somehow managed to cope with the harmful zipper and hid the boots so that they did not spoil the view of the new apartment, Sophia did not see, but heard her voice from the kitchen. And soon she was watching how skillfully she made a braid on the rim of the strawberry shortcake. Several bags of frozen berries Jackson had bought for their romantic evening a couple of days before, but even pleasant memories didn't relieve Alice of her sense of stiffness. Out of politeness, she suggested, Sophia, let me help you with something. Nonsense. I'm almost done with the pie. All that's left is to put it in the oven. By the way, I'd like to remind you that it's better to speak more simply to me. Put the kettle on if you like. Alice hurried to comply with either an order or a request, and sat down again at the table not to disturb Jackson's sister. It's good that Alice did not see at this answer, whether Sophia's eyes sparkled, already sent a cake of culinary masterpiece in the oven. Woman washed her hands, wiped them thoroughly with a towel. She took off her apron, hung it neatly on the back of her chair, and sat down across from Alice. So tell me, how did you two meet? It must have been some amazing and romantic story. The girl did not embellish anything, but she did not want to tell Sophia about her financial problem. She answered, a little embarrassed. There was nothing romantic about our acquaintance. Jackson called me in to clean this very apartment. Don't get the wrong idea. I wasn't trying to hit on him. And he was gallant, too. The affair began completely unnoticed. It was impossible not to fall in love with Jackson. He's so wonderful, the best in the world. She turned away from Alice to turn off the kettle, and confirmed it. Exactly. There was the sound of the door opening, and she made a sign to Alice, putting her finger to her lips, and then whispered, Sit here, be quiet, so that the real surprise comes out. Leaving Alice in the kitchen, she went out into the hallway. The girl heard her sister asking the man in an intriguing tone, Wait, don't take off your jacket or take off your clothes. Guess what gift is waiting for you? Jackson replied that he didn't know. I think it's my favorite strawberry pie. I need to go get some cream for whipping. That'll be right with me, the woman playfully inquired. What else do you think? All of Jackson's answers had to do with food. And she even jokingly rebuked him. Are you that hungry or something? Well, I won't torture you anymore. Come on, you'll see for yourself. Jackson entered the kitchen, and when he saw Alice, he turned pale. After a few seconds, he regained his composure and said hello in an emphatic, formal, and polite manner. Good evening, Alice. You must have forgotten something. The girl saw that he was winking at her, urging her to lie. The silent scene did not last long. Jackson was the first to speak. "Sophia, this is Alice from the service. She's about to leave." The man who said he was as free as the wind began to make excuses. "I don't know what you're imagining. Sophia, you know you're the only woman I love. Whatever that cleaning lady told you, none of it's true." A smirk distorted Sophia's beautiful face. The woman was hitting the words hard. "Jackson, why are you breaking the comedy? I don't believe it either, and I wonder why you, my sweet husband, so ardently dissuaded me from moving so quickly, telling me you miss me. But you didn't want me to get in trouble for quitting in a hurry, said there was no point in going from one end of town to the other. You assured me you'd do anything to make me happy and comfortable. And first, to fully equip the apartment. And he, as I suspected, found some fun for himself. Well, what can I say? Alice, whom you just dismissively called a janitor, thinks you're the most wonderful person in the world. What a disappointment, you know." Jackson, who had pulled himself together, realized that not everything was known about his relationship with Alice. With hatred, he looked at his almost crying mistress, and through his teeth he muttered, "I can't believe you came all the way out here. I told you I was busy, and you showed up for some reason, you bitch." Alice had no more energy. She wanted to disappear immediately or wake up at her laptop, as if she'd only dreamt the nightmare. Unfortunately, it was all real. The offended girl walked past Sophia, hiding her gaze. It wasn't until she was leveled with Jackson, found the courage to slap him in the face. After that, Alice almost ran to hurry away from the apartment where her heart broke. Grabbing her down jacket, she began to forget herself, but a sharp jerk, the zipper on her boot, finally broke. It was the last straw, and the girl cried after all. Without even trying to cope with the second boot, she ran out into the entryway, as it were, risking tripping and falling. Alice hurried downstairs. She didn't care if she had an accident, as long as she was outside as soon as possible. The winter chill seeped through her clothes and shoes. The tears that ran down her cheeks receded into her skin. The girl cursed both her credulity and her grief-ordinary fate. There was no way Alice could be sick. Gritting her heart, she caught over her shin boots, somehow pulled the doomed and hurried home, at times breaking into a run. There was no time to repent and feel sorry for herself. Waiting for the girl not finished work, which helped distract her from the memories of recent humiliation. For Alice, the days stretched on, in which there was no longer any joy. She tried to keep herself fully occupied with her work so that she wouldn't have time to think about how dishonorable Jackson had been to her. The girl, on the other hand, asked him if he was free, and he assured her he was free. In addition, when she saw women's things in his apartment, the man, without the slightest embarrassment, replied that he had a sister visiting from time to time. Such cynical lies corrupted Alice and made her feel disgusted. She had the feeling that her naivety was just used and then just thrown away, as without thinking, sent to the garbage can for good and bad. Zoya felt that her daughter's mood was disgusting and tried to find out what had happened. However, Alice did not want to worry her mother and stubbornly answered all the questions. "Don't worry, I'm fine. I'm just worried about you and I miss you a lot. I wish you'd get out of here sooner." The girl hugged her mother, smelling the smell of the hospital, and barely restrained herself from crying. Zoya's tests were not very good, and the surgery was postponed. At one of her visits, the woman said, to visit her Alice, "Our daughter has a new doctor on the ward today for rounds. She's very attentive, and although she looks pretty young, she's very competent. They say that she is the one who will be doing most of the surgeries now. She asked me to go to her office with one of the relatives to talk about all the nuances. Do you have some free time today?" Alice nodded. The news about the new doctor excited her. The girl wanted to be sure of the competence of the person on whom her mother's life depended, and she answered that she was ready to go to the interview immediately. Soon Zoya and Alice were already in the office, and the girl's knees nearly buckled when she saw who was sitting at the table. There was no doubt even in her trademark robe, white with a green handle. She couldn't help recognizing Jackson's wife. As if to confirm this fact, Zoya introduced her daughter to the doctor. "She's Sophia. This Alice is my daughter. She's my only relative. And you can talk to her about anything you need to." The doctor, who also clearly recognized Jackson's mistress, acted as if she was seeing Alice for the first time. Once again, carefully studied the medical history and listened to Zoe's answers to her questions. She smiled cheerfully. "Let's be optimistic. Some of the numbers are, frankly, a little alarming to me, so I recommend taking your time. The better prepared your body is, the easier it will be to survive the surgery. So, for now, I suggest supporting therapy for a week. Then we'll look at the results of the tests again and we'll make a decision. It's a deal." Alice and Zoya nodded and thanked Sophia and left the office. Alice took her mother to her room and promised to come back the next day. She said goodbye. However, the girl hurried not to leave the hospital, but to Sophia's office. To clarify the situation, she knocked and heard permission to enter. Alice, taking a deep breath to calm down, crossed the threshold. "Sophia, of course you recognized me. I don't think you're very happy about it. If you wish, I can ask the head of the department to have my mother treated by another doctor." Sophia looked at Alice with a disdainful look. She noticed, not a new sweater and modest jeans, and generally the mistress of her husband. Didn't look like a winner at all, who got a trophy named Jackson, allowing herself a moment of schadenfreude. The doctor turned to the computer monitor, simultaneously dropping a few short phrases to her visitor. "Nonsense. I don't mix my work and my personal life. Everything in my power I will do." The girl tried to clear her conscience, which she was restless and in a hurry, so that the doctor did not have time to kick her out. She spoke up. "I understand that you think I am a creature of evil, and of course you have every right to do so. I feel guilty before you too. Sophia, I probably have no excuse, but I really wish that my blunder and gullibility had not affected the quality of my mother's treatment. I am terribly ashamed that I could not resist Jackson. I beg you to forgive me." The woman broke away from her duties and, turning to Alice, raised an eyebrow in surprise. "So you're telling me you haven't seen or talked to Jackson since that night?" Alice shook her head. "I blocked his number in all my messengers that night. It's better to break up right away, that's all. Besides, there's nothing to talk about." "My bad." Sophia couldn't help it. She even whistled, which Alice didn't expect her to do, and then she explained. "Jackson turned out to be even more cynical. Is he more of a liar than I thought? He said that either I forgave him and everything would go back to the way it was, or he would sue me for everything he could and live in that apartment with you. He thought that under the threat, how busy she was, said goodbye, especially since there was already someone knocking at the door of the office." The doctor once again promised, "Okay, Alice, I think there's no more reticence between us. I'll do what I can for your mother. I'm sorry." "Good. Bye now." The girl left the office. After the conversation, she felt a little better. However, the more she mentally scrolled through the phrases Sophia said, the more wild the situation seemed to her. Why the unfaithful husband had stayed in the apartment that fateful night while his wife had been forced to go to a hotel. It turns out Jackson didn't even try to beg her to forgive him. Why did he do this to his wife, who, according to the girl, was objectively good-looking and held herself in a very difficult moment in her life with stunning equanimity? After all, how deftly she had behaved with her. Alice. When she listened to how wonderful Jackson was, she did not even look at her anger at her unfaithful husband and her very mistress. However, all these oddities of someone else's family life, the girl worried much less than her mother's health for the years spent together fighting her illness Alice herself began to understand a lot of complicated terms and numbers of tests, so she clearly understood that this time the battle would be even more intense. It was difficult to concentrate. Alice was constantly distracted, but after a remark sitting at the neighboring table, her colleague tried to pull herself together. After all, she absolutely could not lose the source of constant earnings. At the next inevitable meeting with Sophia, after clarification of the date of surgery, Alice dared to ask about the financial compensation, but the doctor forbade even to raise the subject. Don't be silly. Everything will be done according to the policy, so don't even hesitate to talk about it. Alice realized that the conversation was over and went to her mother's room. Zoya did not look too good, but the girl tried to cheer her up. You'll see, everything will be fine. After the surgery, you'll wake up, and I'll be there for you. Then I'll take a vacation, and you and I will go somewhere. The woman smiled weakly and asked, "Let's at least take a walk in the hallway now. I can't even physically be in my room anymore." Mom and daughter went out into the corridor, walked to the quiet corner, and Zoya dreamily thought about it and said, "You know, Alice, the thing I'd most like to do is go to our dacha. Of course, the new owners have been living there for a long time now, but at least I'd like to take a walk in those places and breathe in the clean air. Do you remember how nice it was there? But I guess that's not the case. I have a gloomy feeling about it. I'm telling you for sure that everything will be fine. As soon as we can, we'll go there right away. If we like it, maybe by the summer we can rent a house in that area, but with all the amenities. Isn't it very far to the city? The shuttle bus, I hope, is still going by. I can easily go there and back in the mornings and evenings. It's going to be just wonderful." Zoya hugged her daughter and asked, "You must promise me that you will fulfill my dream anyway, and you must visit the place where we were so happy." Alice was indignant. "Mom, what's with the gloomy mood? We'll go with you, and I think we'll even live. So keep your head up." Zoya's pessimism was transmitted to her daughter. When parting with her mother, the girl was not just worried, she could barely hold back her tears and was on the verge of panic. She was incredibly scared and absolutely did not know what to do with the gloomy premonitions, which now tormented her too. For the day of the operation, Alice asked herself off from work, for the girl knew that she would be very worried. And in this state of mind, she was not a good worker. In addition, she wanted to be by her mother's side when she woke up after the operation. Alice was even afraid to move away from the busy place so as not to miss the appearance of Sophia. And finally, she waited. However, the closer the doctor approached her, the more worried the girl. From the expressive eyes of her former lover's wife, Alice instantly realized that the irreparable had happened. She spoke clearly with difficulty, choosing her words. "I offer my condolences. Zoe's heart couldn't take the surgery. I'm so sorry, Alice. Me and the whole team did everything we could, but we weren't successful. I'm so sorry. There's someone who's going to come over and tell you how to proceed. I'm sorry for you. Be strong." Alice couldn't even move from her seat. And then she started rushing into the operating room, screaming to be let in to see her mother. Somehow the two orderlies managed to twist the scandalized girl and almost forced to drink a nasty-tasting sedative. Money was needed again. Savings again were insufficient. But the girl could not work in such a state. She managed to get a loan from her employer, and thanks to that she saw her only loved one off to his last journey. Alice watched with bated breath as the cemetery staff lowered the coffin into the pit. She didn't feel cold, and so, probably, and would have stood, but Nika, a neighbor in the former dacha and a good friend of the deceased, touched her hand and said, "Alice, everyone is already on the bus, just waiting for you. Let's say goodbye, girl, and go quietly." The woman tactfully stepped aside, and Alice had to leave the place of mourning. How to go on living without her mother, the girl did not know. She began to feel apathy toward all the joys of life. She drove just to avoid fainting from hunger. She worked to pay back the loan and had absolutely no idea why she needed it all. Her old boots were still in need of repair, but the girl didn't care. She bitterly regretted not getting the doctors to double check her mother's heart condition and blamed herself for the affair with Jackson. It seemed to her that if it hadn't been for the affair, Sophia would probably have been more attentive and wouldn't have missed the alarming symptoms of Zoe's condition. Winter, with its hot session and the overwhelming pain of losing her mother, was behind her. Despite the lack of orders from students, Alice was filled to the brim with work. She took on any projects, defended her colleagues, and sometimes even openly invented any occupation, if only not to return to the finally empty apartment. It was not the hours she spent in front of the screen that wore her down. It was the sleepless nights. For months on end, from dusk till dawn, she pondered the tragedy hundreds of times, powerless to think of actions that could prevent the death of her mother. Sleeping pills, which advised the woman, a pharmacist from a nearby pharmacy, helped to forget only for a few hours, sometimes returning from work. Alice did not even eat, fell asleep on the bed, and at night again returned to it. As a result of such a grueling regime, she walked like half dead and did not pay attention to anything that happens around. One day, thinking about the fact that the old sneakers that I'm going to finally fall apart and it's time to go to market, was already preparing to open the door of the entrance. But she was called out by a man's voice, which was vaguely familiar to her. The girl turned around and was surprised to see Jackson, her former lover, who had behaved very unmanly upon parting. He asked, "Wait a minute. There's an important topic, but I can't get in touch with you. You seem to have blocked me everywhere. Besides, the conversation between us, as they say, is going to be confidential." Staying in a disgusting state of mind, Alice not even thought it necessary to say hello, joked that it is necessary to get out, or other fools are not found, to more savory services provide. The man was not at all embarrassed and ignored the taunts of her former mistress, once again became, as she knew him in the early days of acquaintance, politely affectionate, attentive. "Alice, this isn't going to be a very easy conversation. I can't even think of a good way to begin it. Actually, I'm not quite the scoundrel you thought I was. It wasn't very human of us to break up. It was too sudden when you showed up. So I tried to get out of it. I'm sorry, I admit I was unseemly. You must understand and forgive me. You must understand and forgive me. You know how sad I remember our meetings. I've just heard about your loss from Sophia, and I feel incredibly ashamed. I'm sorry for your loss, and I want to do something for you." Alice, who was already starting to freeze, wanted to hurry away from Jackson and hide in the entryway. But the man threatening her the way made an unexpected suggestion. "Alice, I didn't come to you about the past, but about the present and the future. Let's talk about it somewhere quiet. Do you want to go to a cafe? Do you want to go to your house? Remember how good we used to be together. Let's sit and talk. You won't regret it." The only thing was that she was in no hurry to fall under the charms of the experienced womanizer again. "I'm incredibly tired, and frankly, it's below average pleasure to talk to you, and I don't want to go anywhere in your company, let alone invite you to visit either. Say everything here and now." Faced with the impertinence of a girl who had recently melted at his words, Jackson didn't seem at all embarrassed and went straight to the point of his visit. "Alice, you really need the money right now, don't you? Let's sue Sophia. I found a guy I know who's going to win the case in court. He'll get a lot of money, a decent settlement, although she herself, of course, during her sleepless nights, the idea of suing the nurses had crossed her mind. Such a solution seemed to her somehow unfair. She herself understood that they were far from God's, and her mother's condition was deplorable. She even considered the betrayal of the ideals that had been nurtured in her by her mother, who had died on the operating table. Jackson understood. The silence as the girl's willingness to agree to his plan and emotionally began to push for a positive decision as soon as possible. Oh, don't even think about it. The case will work out. Listening to the man she'd recently been in love with, Alice couldn't believe her own ears. Jackson's proposal was unfair to his wife and generally disgusting in its essence. As much as Alice was not shocked by such cynicism, but realized that the former lover would not have cared about her if he had no interest of his own, so she clarified with Jackson, "And what joy is it to you if your wife is found guilty?" The man looked at Alice with a hard look and changed his tone from businesslike to classy, almost straightforwardly stated, "Who wants you to get at least financial compensation? It's enough to pay the legal fees and to live a completely free life. And of course, a part of the compensation is due to me. First, for the idea, and secondly, because I will testify, if necessary, that there was a conflict between you and her, and she may well have held a grudge against you and taken revenge." Jackson's confession of pecuniary interest finally shattered all Alice's illusions. She felt disgusted that she was in love with such a disgusting, unscrupulous type. Suddenly, her thoughts ran in a completely different direction. It occurred to Alice that Sophia and Jackson's marriage was bursting at the seams, and her husband was simply trying to get out of this situation with a little gain. Participate in his dishonest plan she did not want, but she had the opportunity to get revenge on the sneaky lover. Alice pretended to agree. "I have to think about it, because a lawsuit is hardly a pleasant experience." However, the man had an argument prepared for such an answer. He allowed himself to touch Alice's shoulder, which she jerked sharply, realizing that the girl had not forgiven him. As if jokingly, he put his hands up and explained, "Calm down, baby. You don't even have to do anything special. A lawyer will draw up a statement of claim on your behalf. If you want, you don't have to do anything at all. Write a power of attorney in the lawyer's name, and that's it. The only thing this option, of course, will be longer, but the compensation and these costs will more than cover." Alice promised Jackson to think about his proposal and finally ended the unexpected and unpleasant conversation. She went up to the apartment. Communicating with her former lover had finally spoiled the girl's mood. Alice had a lot to think about. Perhaps there was no malice in Sophia's action, and the cause of her mother's death during surgery was a previously undermined health. In that case, it was silly to take revenge on the doctor. At the same time, Alice is well aware that even if the fatal mistake was made intentionally, it is unlikely that the search for the truth of justice will be fast and not necessarily be productive. In either case, she was assigned the role of the Avengers. Alice didn't like that too much. She was not at all sure of the doctor's guilt, and it was not fair to kill her just for spite and resentment against the whole world, which now had no mother. Besides, the girl didn't understand why Jackson really wanted to drag her former mistress into a fight with his wife. This had to be figured out, and Alice couldn't think of anything better to do than by finding out her online schedule. What shift she worked to go to the meeting. Of course, she had to ask her supervisor again for permission to go to the office closer to lunch. But to the joy of the girl, the manager once again made a small concession, because he was sure that she would then more than compensate for her absence. In the morning, when the hospital has not yet started working hours, Alice was already at the door. She was very nervous before the upcoming conversation, and by the time Jackson's wife showed up on the porch, she almost gave up on the porch. She almost gave up on her plan. Sophia, however, noticed her and approached her. "Hello, Alice." The girl could barely contain her trembling nerves, and she had no energy to rant. "Hello? It is very important for me to know what is your relationship with Jackson right now. Please answer honestly." The doctor looked at the girl perplexed, a little confused by such a strange question, and then answered contemptuously, "There is no relationship. If you want, you can have him for yourself. I've already filed for divorce, and he let me know that the division of jointly acquired property will be fierce. I'm just now realizing what a jerk I married and what a stupid thing I did by selling my marital apartment for more space. Of course, he will try to squeeze everything from me that he has and has no right to. So don't worry, you'll get him as a well-to-do man. Alice did not dare to insert a word, but Sophia herself often interrupted her monologue, greeting colleagues and visitors to the hospital. He just wanted to get his wife out of a state of composure, to distract her from the divorce process, and, as a result, to make as much profit as possible. Alice now knew for sure that she did not want to become an unwitting accomplice to the seizure of property. More precisely, a screen under cover of which Jackson would carry out his plan. Now the girl had only to decide whether to tell them what the man who was still her husband was up to, or let the situation resolve itself somehow. And it was necessary to decide immediately. Alice made up her mind and said, "Sophia, I advise you to be careful. Keep in mind that any mistakes you have made or will make could lead to lawsuits." Even under a layer of makeup, you could see how pale the woman had become. But it wasn't fright, it was rage. "Oh, that's it. I thought it was the department head who was getting a lot of anonymous letters asking to see if I was qualified. Jackson's the one who's been bugging me with you. Well done. What else can I say? He knows that work is everything to me. So he decided to hit where it hurts the most, that you are angry with me because of Mom's death. I perfectly understand your desire to hurt me. I can even justify it. Although, once again, it was not in my power to get Zoe out. But I can't even make excuses for Jackson. Not only did he cheat on me, but he wants to steal and rob me of everything. He's a beauty. All right? I'm gonna run, or I'm gonna get a reprimand for being late in addition to the anonymous tip. By the way, tell Jackson he shouldn't do this to me. I didn't do anything wrong to him. The way he acts, he's gonna get hit with a boomerang." Sophia really ran through the door of the hospital, and Alice felt completely devastated. She had guessed that Jackson had decided to solve his problems with her hand, and now the suspicion had almost turned into certainty. With the onset of the warm days, Alice became completely sick of sad thoughts, once again remembering her last conversation with her mother. She made a decision to go to the dacha array the next weekend, where they were happy. At lunchtime, the girl picked up groceries in the supermarket that did not require cooking, and then, barely waiting for the end of the working Friday afternoon, she hurried to the nearest bus stop. Once in a crowded bus, Alice closed her eyes and in the stuffiness suddenly felt a kind of joyful excitement, as if her mother would meet her there at the cottage, and they would have a snack of food, terribly delicious in the fresh air. They will go for a walk. The happy reveries helped her forget the inconvenience of public transportation, and as if the body still remembered all the turns of the road, the girl awoke from her oblivion. Shortly before the desired stop walk to the exit, Alice, along with the other fellow travelers, left the bus. There were no familiar faces among the passengers who got off at the stop. However, the girl assumed that over the years, while she did not show up in the previously familiar dacha area, many of the inhabitants had already changed. This was evidenced by the new doggies that had replaced the modest accounts of the house. More like a hut. Many things were different now, but her feet brought Alice to the right line in their own. Only nothing that was. Sweet to a girl's heart was not left. On the former side of her mother, painted a tall iron fence with tiles. There was no doubt that there was nothing left of the cottage either. The girl felt uncomfortable. She did not understand why she had come here. Figuring out how to get back to the city, Alice walked down the street, where she could hear laughter, the provocative appetite, the smell of kebabs on the next line. Transformation was not so evocative. At home, where almost all of the warm season, Nika, A friend of Leeson's and Mom's used to live there. It remained almost the same. Of course, the trees had grown up. A small shoulder has appeared, but the familiar figures of Aunt Nika zealously tended their small plot. There was no light in the windows. The girl was even a little saddened, and then noticed that the bench, standing close to the fence on the side of the street, remained the same. Alice decided to sit down on it and rest a little before the return trip. Can't count how many pleasant evenings her mother and she herself had spent here, resting after gardening exploits. Nika and Zoya had much in common, and almost every weekend they were sure to meet to share joys or problems. Both were single mothers, but did not worry about it and did not complain, raising their children. Nika's son Victor, Zoya her Alice. Women sitting on a bench, talked about something, shared some recipes. And while the children were small, played on the playground at the end of the line, looked after them. All together, they went to the woods and to the nearby creeks, and the women were not at all bored with their close companionship. Nika's son Victor was 3 years older than Alice and a few years older than Alice in the spring. She was even in love with him. But he always treated his dacha neighbor as a friend and did not reciprocate. On unlike days, the buddies would go to each other's houses to visit. It was Aunt Nika who helped Alice's mother find a generous buyer for her dacha plot. From the memories, which brought back the moments, nothing clouded her happiness. By a hard time, the girl was completely frustrated and sank down on the bench. A few minutes later, a black cat ran up to Alice. At a run, jumped to her knees and put his hand on her broad forehead, demanding affection. The girl whispered enthusiastically, "Hello, my sweet bird." Soon the gate opened and a worried mother's friend came up to the girl. "Alice, are you?" "I'm not feeling too good today. I came to rest early and then I heard through my sleep Behemoth started asking Doranina to go outside, so I let him out. I looked at him and after a few days, he ran to you. Then I noticed that on the bench some girl was sitting and stroking him. He's still distrustful of strangers. So I knew right away that someone was one of us." "What's the matter?" "A girl." The girl stood up from the bench, gently holding the cat sticking out like a little fluffy tractor, and greeted the woman. "Good evening, Aunt Nika. I'm sorry to interrupt your holiday. Nothing's the matter. I just missed the place. I wanted to take a walk here, and everything's changed so much. I don't think you'll recognize it in a few years." Nika hurried to invite the girl into the house. "It's great to be here. Let's go inside. I'm not so bored. And you can see how happy Hippo is." Alice didn't try very hard to refuse. She liked Aunt Nika. Something she subtly reminded her mother, and she wanted to spend more time with her. The friendly woman was very cozy and comfortable in the house. Nika praised her. "You see, Victor, you always bring me newfangled kulai. I want cold water, I spoil. I want herbs, and I infuse them. My son's business is going well. He's about to be sent on a business trip abroad. And he's got a girlfriend. He hasn't introduced me to her yet, but it looks serious." Nika noticed that the guest was still holding the cat. She was indignant. "Come on, Alice. That's how he'll sit in my arms forever. Although, to be fair, he is far from demanding to be petted." "All right, Alice, don't spoil the cat. Wash your hands and sit down at the table." Alice unquestioningly obeyed, as if returned to his childhood years, to the displeasure of the behemoth. He was left on the chair, but not tolerating such neglect, instantly jumped out of his favorite rookery and followed his guest, trying to stroke at least the feet of the girl. Alice was taking the groceries she'd brought from the city out of her bag, and she justified herself that I wasn't going to visit. I thought I'd take a little break, and then I'd drive back. I didn't realize how I got to your house." Nika chided the girl affectionately. "It's been a long time since I've seen you. You've completely forgotten me. You don't call, you don't come. Oh, you know, they opened a store here, on the other side of the estate, where there are more newfangled cottages. There's all kinds of stuff there. We went there at first like on a tour, and there's lobsters of all kinds, and sausages, dozens of varieties. The funny thing is that the crayfish are already boiled with spices in glass jars, but for a horrible price, really. Remember how much we fished them out, and we boiled them right on the shore. Oh, that was great. Alice also remembered those happy summer days when one could find an escape from the heat only by the water, and stood up for it with her heart. Somewhere far away remained unpleasant conversations with Jackson and his wife. The hippopotamus kept wriggling underfoot, and the landlady smiled as she watched her pet, begging for affection. Look how he remembers that it was you who saved him. I can still remember that summer evening when Zoya came running to me to ask if I had a package. And she told me that you had noticed the package, and she told me that you had noticed the package at the bus stop in the trash garbage can. Inside, there were 3 dead kittens, and 1 alive, still blind. How did you take care of him and his mother then? I fed him from my hands. Zoya went to work and he was too scared to move him. It wasn't far to the city, though. You took care of him here, and you spent a whole week by yourself at the dacha treating the owner. Zoya said later that even though she was worried about you, she was proud that you passed such a life exam with honor, and how you suffered for him when he caught an infection 3 weeks after his discovery. You had sleepless nights again. They gave him all kinds of drugs. And I got him out. After all, he got stronger. He turned out to be grateful. He followed you all summer long, even ran to the river after you. You gave him a nickname, too, as his savior. It was hilarious. When a school friend came to see Victor unexpectedly, he asked me where he was. And I told him that I'm on the river with a hippo. The kid gave me such a look that I had to explain myself. Now, you see, even from a distance, he could smell you. He is not even young. He is almost 12 years old. He is handsome. Alice nodded, remembering the story of the kitten who turned into a beggarly handsome man. I had just read The Master and Margarita. I didn't even have to think about the nickname. I didn't know such misunderstandings could happen. Nika smiled again. Good daughter Zoe always liked it very much. Even the fact that the cat ended up being her ward did not worsen the relationship with her friend, Alice admitted. I had hoped so much that my mother would let me keep Behemoth, and I was terribly offended when in the fall she flatly forbade me to take him home. I felt like such a horrible traitor to myself. I could not understand the refusal. Only a few years later, my mother explained to me that she did not have extra money to properly support a cat. It turns out that she had already spent all the cash she had bought on vitamins and medicine, that he was sick and needed. It's good that you agreed to take him in, and I could play with him whenever I wanted. It's nice that he remembered me. After a touching memory, Alice decided to share her problem with a friendly woman, but did not go into details of a delicate situation. Aunt Nika, a man offered me to sue the doctor, and I learned that this Gooder actually has a financial interest in this matter. I need the money, but I see something despicable in this way. The mistress of the house stood up from the table and motherly embraced her guest. Confessing, Zoya called me on the eve of the operation. She was firmly convinced that she would not survive. Of course, I tried to change her mind, to cheer her up in some way, but without much success. I think she was just tired of the pain, of seeing you struggling and pulling your own weight. She wanted to free herself and free you. I don't think she would have wanted you to become angry and reckless with vindictiveness, especially since doctors usually follow an unspoken code. And even if any sins were committed in the surgery, it would be very difficult to get the truth. You're dragging everything into a fight, which is unlikely to be a winner. In addition, there is no guarantee that the person who offered you this adventure does not have his own self-interest. Alice was struck by how finely Nika felt the whole situation, not even knowing all the nuances. Now the girl definitely made a decision not to cause problems to Jackson's wife and not to get even more involved in other people's family problems, to which she accidentally became involved. Conversation with a friend of her mother calmed Alice, and she began to get ready for home. Nika objected. Alice, take your time. Tomorrow Victor should come. On Sunday morning. He usually goes back so as not to stand in traffic. Stay here. There's enough room. You'll get some rest at least. Too bad there's nothing else growing besides sorrel and onions. But tomorrow we'll get some salad and vitamins. The desire to stay with the hospitable Aunt Nika was great, but Alice was embarrassed to embarrass her. After all, the house was quite small, and with the arrival of Victor Place would be quite small. Having promised to come as often as she could, the girl persuaded the hospitable hostess to stay at home. Aunt Nika, excuse me again for the unintentional intrusion. You don't have to see me off. I know my way around here very well, and I won't be able to get lost. The girl petted the hippo and hurried to dress in time to catch the bus. Nika herself understood that no danger to her daughter at the cottage, but still took a promise from Alice that she will certainly let her know when she gets home. The girl had almost reached the bus stop when a joyful shriek resounded from the window of the car pulling up and next to her. This was the encounter. A former classmate, Veronica, jumped out of the salon of a foreign car, looking as usual, great, and rushed to embrace. Alice's mood, which after talking with Aunt Marina was great, she said a cheerful hello. Veronica, hi. It's good to see you. I don't even want to hear anything. Come on, get in. We're going into town anyway. We have to take the documents there right away. So we'll take you wherever you need to go. You can't refuse. And you know me. Where do you live now? Same place as before. Alice gave her friend the address, thinking that she no longer remembered where she had come to visit her. But Veronica remembered and was even happier. That's nice. So we're on our way at all. At the wheel of the SUV sat an unfamiliar man, whom Veronica carelessly introduced to Nanny, and after telling him the address where he had to take the girl, explained that, Alice, remember I told you about her. My high school diploma is almost entirely due to her. She's got a great brain. In fact, she's a world girl. The man nodded sparingly at the flow of information and waited until the girls were comfortably seated on the rear passenger seats, and smoothly moved the car from the seat. He even cranked up the stereo to make it easier for them to talk. Although it was hard to call such different in character and wealth girls best friends, both were genuinely happy to see each other. Veronica asked with interest, Come on, tell me about it. What brings you to these parts? Alice answered without holding back. I used to have a dacha here. I got sad, and I wanted to come here. I have a place of power here. As our curator said, Veronica responded enthusiastically, asking a lot of questions. I remember him urging me to find such a place for myself. And my parents and I recently bought a dacha here. Indeed, they say that they feel completely different here. I feel something like that here too. Listen, it's great that we met. You don't go to graduation camp, and none of us know about you. Come on, tell me what you're like, how you're still working there. I did not ask my father how things go well at his buddy's firm. They do not hurt you. How is your mother feeling? Alice politely thanked her former classmate. Veronica, thank you. Everything is good. The work is great. The boss is wonderful. The team is good. Only my mother passed away in January. Veronica sympathetically stroked Alice on the shoulder. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I'm sorry for your loss. If you need help, don't hesitate to tell me. Whatever I can do, I'll help you. Alice felt sorry for such a sincere disposition. Even tears came to her eyes. But she did not abuse the generosity of Veronica, who had already done much good for her. Thanks for the kind words, Veronica, but I'm doing fine. Really. The powerful car, masterfully driven by the silent and tactful Nanny, was already driving through the city streets, obediently slowing down at the forbidding traffic lights. Alice asked, Veronica, I'll get off at that intersection over there, and I can't get far from home. It's right behind that drop. off. I remember very well. And I also remember that there are always punks sitting on the playground in the evenings, which is supposed to be the children's playground. So in a few minutes, we'll take you right to the place. And while we're driving, dictate me your number because I lost my phone and all my contacts disappeared. Now I'm restoring them one by one. I checked my social media. You do not look. Soon, Alice was already standing at the entrance and waving to the departing car. From the window that stuck out Veronica, repeating this gesture. Once home, the girl sent a text message to her Aunt Nika, saying that she arrived safely after an eventful evening. Alice hoped to fall asleep without any problems. Even the lonely apartment, where the mirrors were still behind the latest fabrics, after such wonderful soul-playing meetings, did not seem dull, which meant that there was every chance of a sound and healthy sleep. However, the plan to get a good night's rest was interrupted by the doorbell. Alice did not want to see anyone, although the day was rich in pleasant emotion. She was incredibly tired, but persistently continued to rumble through the apartment. There was nothing to dream of resting under such a not very musical accompaniment. Girl involuntarily had to go to the door peephole. Alice saw Jackson. He seemed to have been watching her and knew she was home for sure. That was why he had been so insistent, regretting ever letting a man walk her to her apartment. The girl opened the door and asked, not too politely, "Hello." "What do you need?" Jackson clarified. "Can't you at least let me into your apartment for decency? I don't think all the neighbors need to know what we're talking about." The girl let Jackson in. She looked at him questioningly. He didn't keep her waiting long and started to make a complaint. "Look, I'm certainly patient, but not indefinitely. How long do I have to wait for an answer? I mean, I wish you well. You are ready. The lawsuit does not roll out." Alice did not roll out. Alice did not delay an undesirable meeting and honestly reported, "No lawsuits, as you put it. I will not roll out. Goodbye then." But Jackson was not going to give up and began to persuade him. "You refuse in vain. And you're scared for nothing," I consulted. "There's even a chance to get a decent amount in pretrial proceedings. All you need is nothing. What's the point of being a wuss if the money's just floating in your hands?" No one knows how long Jackson would have continued to harass the girl, but the doorbell rang again. The man grumbled grudgingly. "Here it is quiet. It's almost midnight. She either comes in a foreign car or receives guests," not responding to the man's offensive remarks. Alice went around him and was doubly pleased when she saw that Veronica and Nani had come to see her. The girl immediately invited them in. Jackson said hello to his guest in a confused manner. "Veronica, good evening. I didn't expect to find you here." Then the man turned to the landlady. "Alice, think it over. I'm waiting for a final answer. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Goodbye, everybody." Jackson left, and Alice was relieved to close the door behind him and invite her saviors in. "Come in, make yourself at home," Veronica explained. "I'm sorry for not calling, but we won't be long if you don't mind. Let's talk to you some more." Nani agreed to walk me to my apartment, and for good reason. "If you want, though, we'll send him away. Let him wait in the car." The girl didn't want to send the guest away, so she offered, "I'll put the tea on, and you come in. Don't be shy." Veronica nudged Alice to the side. "There's no need for him to yell. There's the kitchen over there, you can see it, right down the hall," while the silent guy went to wash his hands. Veronica warned Alice, "I'm sorry to pry, but this town is like a small village. I know this Jackson guy a little from work. Whatever he's offering you, you better turn it down. He's a shady guy. My firm canceled contracts with him on time, and a lot of people got caught. He doesn't pull off the most honest schemes. It seems to be all within the law, but his wife seems to be a nice doctor, but he walked away from her on the terrible. Alice warmly thanked her friend. "Thank you, Veronica. I was going to say no to him." While the girls indulged in memories, sometimes laughing to tears. Nanny drank tea in silence and then with interest began to read the recently released detective novel, which the mistress had left on the windowsill. In the morning, Alice was ashamed of her predilection for this genre. Somehow now she was very glad that her new acquaintances and Veronica did not let the bestseller in the house diploma of a philologist, though not working by profession. No joke. Alice's tiredness vanished like a hand. She happily chatted with Veronica, who surprised her with a sudden offer. "Listen, I really need an employee like you. How would you feel about changing jobs? I'm not going to ask for an answer right away. I'll send you a sample job description tomorrow. You can take a look, read it, think about it. On the salary, I think we can agree." At her friend's request, Alice wrote her email address, and then Veronica and Nanny got ready to leave. The guy timidly asked, "Can I take the book with me?" "I promise. As soon as I read it, I'll bring it back right away, because with my schedule, I'm never able to get to bookstores. And with electronic versions, as it turned out, I do not work." Alice allowed it without regret. She liked the silent and good-looking guy, but she did not consider Veronica's companion as an object of her woman's attention. After closing the door behind her guests, the girl cleaned up, and for the first time since the death of her mother, calm, deep sleep, exhausted, the body, and finally received a kind of treatment, a heavy dose of both positive emotions and fresh air. Alice slept very soundly until she was awakened by the doorbell. The girl looked at her watch. It was already 12:00, and she thought it had come again. Jackson doomedly went to open the door. Her premonitions had not failed her, but she did not repeat yesterday's mistakes and did not allow the man into the apartment. She repeated the negative answer and dared to threaten. "Jackson, please don't get on my nerves or I'll go to Sophia and tell her what kind of nasty thing you want to do to her." "Got it." The man almost spat on the floor with anger, not intelligent at all, and launched into a foul curse. Alice did not explain anything more to him and just closed the door. It was as if the girl was freed from a heavy burden and finally breathed free. She turned on her laptop and the first thing she did was open her email. Veronica, as promised, sent her a list of duties of the employee she needed. After rereading the instructions, Alice dialed her friend's number. "Veronica, it's just my dream job. But you can probably guess me. I have absolutely no experience in this field." My companion laughed. "Oh, it's nothing, is it? I know for a fact that you can do it. Listen, it's my birthday next Saturday in a week, and I'd love to see you, especially since the party will be at my dacha. And I also want to invite my boyfriend's mother to meet her and introduce her to her parents." Alice tried to refuse. "Veronica, I think it's kind of awkward. You would practically have a kinship circle there." However, if a thought occurred to Veronica, it was almost impossible to change her mind. Quite the contrary. If it's a small circle, everyone will feel uncomfortable. And the good my dad will start interrogating us. So the more young people, the easier it will be. Besides, I think you'll give me the right advice in time. Otherwise, I might say the wrong thing. Help me out, Alice." Such a pleading girl could not refuse. And not just because Veronica could be her new boss. She herself really wanted to at least a little escape from the swamp of despair that almost consumed her. Alice specified how best to dress, and asked what her friend would like to get as a gift. Veronica laughed again, and then almost seriously asked, "Listen, can you make fortune cookies like you once made for all of us in the group for March 8? That was so cool and original." The rest of the weekend went quietly. Alice spent the evenings of the week trying to find a present for Veronica for the modest sum she had. In addition to treats, she wanted to update her closet to look smart and stylish. And in general, I wanted to prepare for the upcoming celebration. to visit a beauty salon and feel real, alive and ready for happy changes. After a preliminary appointment on Saturday morning, Alice received a phone call from Nanny. "I'm downstairs in the entryway. I finished the book. Do you want me to bring it in now, or do you want to pick it up later?" "You better do it later, or you'll get in the car just fine. I'm afraid that on a Saturday morning, the sooner we leave town, the sooner we can get to the cottage." The girl took her purse with the gift, which contained the phone and keys, and hurried to Veronica's party, not knowing what surprises awaited her. Nanny greeted Alice friendly, and again showing obvious talent as a driver, soon parked the car. Nice-looking mansion in the girl's native countryside at the gate, and the guests were greeted by a smart birthday girl, accepting gifts from Alice and Nanny. Veronica thanked them and invited them to the table set and right outside. Fortunately, the weather already allowed a holiday in the fresh air. Alice said a polite hello to Veronica, the parents with whom she had been acquainted earlier. She was not at all surprised when Nanny exchanged a firm, manly handshake with the father of a former classmate. The girl thought he was Veronica's boyfriend, but the latter suddenly called her aside and told her, "Mine should be here any minute. Please come with me, I'm terrified, though I've never been so timid before." Alice, of course, did not refuse her friend such a little favor. As they walked along the beautifully tiled path, the girl tried to distract the excited companion, but without much success. When Veronica opened the gate, the threshold, to Alice's amazement, Aunt Nika stepped over, accompanied by her son. The birthday girl could not understand why her friend and the mother of her beloved suddenly started smiling broadly. The situation was diffused by Victor. Taking a wide step, he hugged his beloved, handed her gifts, and in his own way introduced her to his mother. "This is my Veronica. You're welcome. Veronica, this is my mom, Nika, who happens to be best friends with Alice's mom." Of course I knew it was a small town, but I didn't know it was such a coincidence. I had no idea. When Veronica's parents met her fiancé's mom, the official part of the party wrapped up by itself, and everyone started to feel more relaxed. After getting a moment, the hero of the occasion, taking Alice aside, clarified what kind of mother she was Victor. The girl didn't lie one bit by answering, "Aunt Nika is just a wonderful person. She raised Victor alone, and of course she loves him, but she raised him well. As a result, he grew up to be a normal man, not a mama's boy. So you were lucky with your fiancé and your future mother-in-law." In a burst of emotion, Veronica hugged Alice tightly and whispered, "And by the way, Nan is very interested in you. He's a wonderful guy, too. Take a good look at him. He's positive from all sides, except he's a little taciturn." The girls went back to the party, and the fun continued with renewed vigor. Alice was in a wonderful mood, but she was not yet used to partying so long and with full dedication. Unnoticed by everyone, as it seemed to her, she retreated under the blue spruce growing on the plot of Veronica's parents. Looking at the beautiful tree, she tidied up her emotions, and reflecting, she almost flinched, hearing her Aunt Nika's voice behind her. "Look, Alice, it's just unbelievable. I was so happy when I saw you next to Veronica. Since you're friends with her, she must be a great girl. And I can be calm about Victor. Of course, Soya and I once dreamed that you, our children, would grow up and get married. But you were best friends and didn't see each other as partners. Anyway, it all worked out pretty well anyway. By the way, Veronica's mom told me a little bit about Nanny, too. Turns out he has his own computer technology business and is a friend of Veronica's childhood. Can you imagine the irony of having an affair with him?" The girl's cheeks ached. She felt good, for the second time in one day, to hear that she cared about a good-looking guy. But Nanny himself hadn't shown his feelings in any way yet. He was polite and courteous, but there had been no overt hints or advances from him. Veronica's birthday party was fun, and despite her fears, no uncomfortable situations arose. The mothers walked around the grounds enthusiastically, sharing information, and the men took care of the shish kebab. Former classmates were having a great time. Alice was very glad that recently, fulfilling almost her mother's last will, she came to the dacha array. After all, it was from that visit to this place that the happy changes in her fate began. As was often the case, her Aunt Nika's premonitions were not in vain. After the holiday of Veronica and her parents' dacha, Nani really started courting Alice unobtrusively and not too talkative in large company or among strangers. In private, he proved to be a pleasant and intelligent conversationalist. The girl enjoyed talking to him about books, and little by little she developed a more and more serious liking for him. After a little deliberation and consultation with her aunt, Alice agreed to Veronica's proposal to change jobs. The boss apparently warned and did not prevent her resignation at his own request. On the contrary, he was very polite and courteous. "Alice, I'll be honest, I'm usually prejudiced against blatant workers who are offered employment. But you pleasantly surprised me. I have almost no beef with you. I'm even sorry to see you go. However, Veronica's got a future for you that I can't offer you. Anyway, I wish you luck. I hope to see you again sometime. Maybe we'll even work together." Veronica could not rejoice at Alice's joining the staff. Although the newcomer was bombarded with a large amount of unfamiliar information, she did not panic and wanted to thoroughly investigate everything. The habit of searching all available sources came in handy, and soon Veronica called Alice to her office and stunned her with the news. "Anyway, I'm telling you, third after my mom and Victor. He and I are going to be parents soon. So I want you to get ready to fill in for me. When I go on maternity leave, I have some time for your training. You learn everything on the fly. So I think my company will be in good hands." Alice was frightened to take on such a responsibility. But Veronica did not listen to her timid objections and playfully threatened. "Soloist, I'm not arguing with a pregnant woman. I have to take care of myself now. So that's it. Don't even question your abilities." Alice began a very stressful period, but she was happy. Working together was an excellent basis for becoming friends with Veronica. The young woman did not take pregnancy too easily, and one day asked Alice not for service, but for friendship. "Help me with the wedding arrangements. I rely on your taste completely." Despite her heavy workload, Alice tried to carve out more time to communicate with Nani and Aunt Nika. The woman was happy to be a grandmother soon, and with the help of her late friend's daughter, she was preparing for Victor and Veronica's wedding. On shopping trips, Alice and Aunt Nika were most often accompanied by Nani. He helped both with transportation and with his manly strength to carry something heavy. On another shopping trip, Aunt Nika had a sore throat. After drinking cold milk in the heat, Alice went alone with Nanny. After walking through a few stores, the couple decided to take a break. The girl sat down in a cafe and the guy went to get tea. Alice was resting and almost flinched in surprise when, without her permission, Jackson sat down at her table. There was a startling change in his appearance. He didn't look well, groomed anymore, and his eyes were puffy, either from abuse of the booze or from his health problems, which was a bitch, enjoying life. "And you know that because of your rejection I have nothing left. Can you be happy? I am now 5 minutes unemployed, homeless, single, and free. In fact, I'm just not wanted." Alice tried to be polite because she didn't want to cause a scandal in a public place. "You shouldn't, Jackson. I'm not at all happy about other people's problems, and I never meant you any harm either. I didn't get you into any trouble at all." As Nanny approached the table, Jackson staggered away. He didn't seem to want to piss off the tough guy. It was much nicer to make a complaint to a defenseless girl than to pick a fight. "Alice, is everything okay?" The girl nodded. Seeing Jackson, who had practically sunk to the bottom in such a short time, she did her best to rid herself of even the memory of him. But she couldn't think of the past for a moment. inexorably approaching the wedding of Victor and Veronica, who certainly wanted to make sure that the photographs were not too noticeable growing belly. The celebration turned out to be touching and tender, and during the next toast, a storm of applause broke out. Nanny, who proposed to Alice. The girl agreed. Soon her life began a new phase, in which there was no room for thoughts of a sneaky lover.